My name is Samantha Kaplan. I'm Assistant Dean in the Office of Diversity and Multicultural Affairs and an Assistant Professor in the Department of OBGYN. My mother's mother was from Trinidad and Jamaica, and my mother's father was from Trinidad, and they both came here to the United States. My father's family was Eastern European and came in the early 1900s, Russian and Hungarian. I grew up in a household where even though I was not a child of the 60s, in fact I was born at the end of the 60s, they were. And so that was sort of the ethos in which I was raised. When I did graduate from college and I worked for 2 years before I went to medical school, the jobs that I held were jobs that were very much in that same vein. I worked as a consultant for a public education fund network that lobbied for policy for public education. And then I worked at a Native American nonprofit that supported indigenous economic development. I think my parents worked very hard to make me unaware of race. And I don't think they worked to make me unaware of race in the concept of colorblindness, but I think they were so very worried that I would grow up burdened by a limitation based in the perception of what I could and couldn't do or what I was able of achieving because of my race, that I don't know whether it was intentional, but I did grow up really unaware, I think, of why people responded to me the way that they did. I was born in the South End, actually, and we moved out of Boston when the city started busing students because my parents did not want me bused. And we moved before Medco started as a program, so there wasn't going to be an option for me to go to a stronger public school unless I was bused or we moved out of the city. So we moved to Natick, where I was the only little girl of color certainly in my grade and probably in my elementary school. And people would touch my hair and I had no clue why they were doing it because of the way that I had been raised. And my mother likes to tell a story about the fact that I went to this camp called Roxbury Weston Camp, which was melding cultures. And she would come and pick me up every day and they would have me in line to get on the bus to go back to Roxbury, even though she was carpooling me to Natick. So it wasn't really, and I had no idea. I mean, I didn't even understand why I was in the bus line. So it wasn't really until much later, I think around college, that I started to realize that regardless of how I thought of myself, that the world was going to make its own judgments and decisions, and that it would have very little to do with what I thought about myself, and I could do very little to control it, actually. I think when you grow up thinking that you can do anything, and then the structured identity that is assigned to you makes itself present in your life later, and then you do achieve, and you look around and you see so very little of yourself in your peer group, in your professional community, and in fact, in my case, I came here because I wanted to work with a population where my interactions would be impactful, where I could educate, where I could empower, specifically women, but also people who had less opportunity, irregardless of race. And then when I got here, I found that the people that I seemed to have the most in common with in terms of at least racial identity were the patients, the nurses, the security guards, but not the doctors. And certainly not even the medical students, really. And I think that was a moment where I realized that there is a lot of work to be done. And it's not because the people who are me don't have the ability to do this, but they're just not here. And so the question is, how do we make medicine, and in particular academic medicine, represent the community? I actually probably entered the medical field because my mother taught Lamaze, and I was very interested in women and childbirth and teaching women about their bodies. When I was in high school and in college, I did a lot of tutoring and a lot of education. but I was a non-traditional major. I was an English major, and so the draw for me was really the people. I was also really lucky because I grew up in a philanthropic family. My father was a civil rights lawyer, and my mother worked in philanthropy, and so the opportunity to be impactful and help people through medicine, and not just help them get well, but change their lives, was something I think that also appealed to me. When I learned about Boston Medical Center and the role that it played, the community in which it was geographically located, and the mission of the hospital, that was a huge draw. I also knew I wanted to be in academic medicine, and this was one of the only places I felt as though I could do work and play the role that I wanted to play while I worked. I would not have to go to work as a physician and volunteer to feel as though I was being impactful for people beyond their health.